Welcome to the O Tech Talks podcast. This podcast is for learning and sharing purposes. And today we have a guest speaker with us, Frank Mendoza. He's the founder of Catalytics. And I would like to welcome Frank for the podcast. And we will hear and we learn from Frank what he's doing over his life and how primarily the topic of AI with ChatGPT in town and everyone is being impacted and organizations started suddenly thinking about it, what they need to do and what they should be going forward for that. So I think before going into deep dive into AI and organization strategies, let's invite Frank to introduce himself, that if someone new to the podcast and audience, and how they will know you, that the Frank is doing what from so many years. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Kashif, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Great pleasure to be here and kind of talking to your audience. It really is a pleasure. So Frank Mendoza, Catalytics is my organization. Started about 7, 8 years ago. Been working with Fortune 500 companies to help them develop their AI strategy, help them develop and execute their AI strategy, if you will. Prior to that, I worked at companies like Dell and 3M. I was a director of strategy and business transformation at Dell. I was a business unit leader at 3M. So I had a long history in corporate America. But in 2015, I really took some of the things that are really passionate, I was really passionate about with regards to data and analytics and
Right.
driving decision making, and then introduced Catalytics. Again, my background is a mechanical engineering background, which I like to say helped me understand how to solve problems. And then got my MBA, which really taught me which problems really need to be solved, right? You take that and marry it with kind of my approach to data and analytics, and that's where I really get excited about helping organizations tackle some of these challenges using statistics, using these advanced analytics technologies like AI, machine learning, data visualizations to really help them make sure that they're heading in the right direction and addressing some of their business objectives.
Okay. So what inspired you to move from corporate America to starting your own, that okay, I know I need to leave the Dell or another, 3M companies. And that's usually we go in a corporate life. What motivated you that okay, now it's a time I need to go start and I need to maybe
Yeah,
focus on
it's
what I
no, it's a great question, Kashif, and I always had aspirations. I always had this entrepreneurial itch about me. I always wanted to try things on my own, just to be kind of out there. And so what I did was I actually left my corporate role and joined a startup. And
okay.
in the spirit of transparency, I joined that startup. It was in the HR tech space.
Hmm.
They were a rewards and recognition company. I was their head of customer success, and we were leading that charge for about 6 months. And then after
Okay.
6 months, the CEO and I just really recognized that was not going to be a match for us, and I was let go. If I'm really being honest with you, it was kind of a gut punch, as you can imagine. Leaving a corporate world, taking almost a 40% pay cut to join the
Yeah.
startup, and then gut punch 6 months later, now you're out without a role. And so my first inclination, Kashif, as many would be, hey, I got to get back in the corporate world. I got to get my
Right.
resume out there and start looking. But one of the best decisions I ever made, and not one of the best decision I've ever made, was the person I married.
Ah,
She knew my passion. She knew kind of where I was trying to go in my career. And she, flipped the script and said, well, you've always wanted to try this consulting practice. You always wanted to do things on your own. Maybe this is an opportunity where the universe is telling you this. You should. And so she encouraged me. Um, we decided to move forward, and honestly, it was a great decision because within a few months, I was able to land a very big client, one that I think
mhm.
most people on your podcast would probably recognize. And I like to say the rest has got me to where I am today.
Okay. All right. So let's take an example of last maybe couple of years. What were the key areas which you supported the organizations, or maybe top key elements we can say that resonated to different organization, and then you started working them. That maybe will bring us that okay, what you do actually, and that will lead us to maybe move into strategy and AI and how you're
Yeah.
helping.
So, Kashiv, I think the reality is even before ChatGPT came out and all these generative AI solutions came out, AI was still very popular. It was very
Right.
kind of, we want to also do that, check the box. We want to introduce some AI into our organizations. And so I would walk into organizations and really take a step back, right?
Hmm.
And say, what problem are you truly trying to solve, right? And how can AI potentially be that solution? Or if it's not, then what is the real, what is some potential solutions that we could investigate? And so, you know, right now, I think there's a lot of shiny object syndrome going on. Everyone sees ChatGPT and wants to introduce it to their business. They see Dolly or they see Midjourney, and they're like, "Oh, this is a very cool thing. Let me introduce it." But the clients that I typically work with, um, when I am introduced to their organization, I really want to understand foundationally what they're trying to do and really make sure that they're laying down that foundation to create long-term value, long-term success. And in some instances, that means not introducing it. In
Hmm.
one instance, I was brought into an organization where they said, we have a customer retention challenge. We have
Right.
and it's causing some significant issue. And we want a machine learning algorithm that's going to identify who those folks are in order
Hmm.
for us to be proactive. So I walked in, did a discovery with them, and within about 3 weeks, recognized um, their data was incomplete. It was not great quality and lack of skills in that space, right? And so I went to
Hmm.
them and I said, listen, the reality of the situation is you're not ready.
Hmm.
We could get you an ML model, we could build an MVP and demonstrate it, but I would argue within a few weeks it's going to start to drift. It's going to start to different data is going to come in that starts to train it, and there will be no one to maintain this solution, right? And so, in that regard, why don't we close up this contract and or right, my alternative was why don't we look at from a statistics perspective and what are the levers that your team could actually be tracking that actually is going to demonstrate value and identifying those folks, maybe not a machine learning algorithm, but other things that are going to be um, important for your consulting, your company CSMs, your customer success managers to
Right.
really track and be aware of. And so we ended up creating some dashboards and created some data visualizations that gave them some line of sight to some levers, what we would have otherwise fed into a machine learning algorithm, but features and attributes that they could then track and start to reduce that customer attrition that they were experiencing.
Okay. Great. Now, let's take an example of an organization. Now, as we know with the ChatGPT, the acceleration is at high speed with the organization, and there's a push that what you're doing in the AI. So there are two types of organization, maybe are three that okay, either they are already in the journey and they are doing something, either they are adopting from some vendors, or they are maybe exploring it, or maybe now they got a push for due to ChatGPT that okay, what they can do it. So as an organization, if they want to go ahead for any strategy, so what do you think? What is their framework on how they can start from step A8 and then they can reach to step B, for example? Or how
Yeah.
you take it up for that organization. Maybe that will help audience that okay, if they're thinking someone is joining a different working in different organization, that will give them a context that okay, if I want to go from where I am today in AI, and then if I want to go out for strategy, Not focusing on chat GPT, but an overall achieving the objective of organization.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So I typically encourage people to understand the technology to some extent, right? Not to the point where you can develop your own algorithms, but
Right.
really try and understand what the technology is capable of doing and not capable of doing. So some level of understanding of the AI. Because too often people think it's magic, right? It's going to magically solve all my problems. And so it's really important to understand kind of the is not of AI, right? And what are the different um, algorithms that you can use? Is deep learning really the expectation, right? That you have enough data? Is it really necessary to use deep learning? Is it more necessary to use machine learning? LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, really understanding kind of what are the use cases. But after that, after you have some preliminary view of what AI can do for your organization, I think the
Mhm.
more important question is, what are your objectives as an organization? What is your objective, your goals as a business? Because ultimately, you want to tie the use of AI or the use cases to those objectives. There should be clear line of sight to the business metrics, the KPIs, and the outcomes that are going to effectively benefit that goal and that use case. I mean that objective, right? Um,
Mhm.
Without that, I think a couple of things happen. If you don't have clear line of sight or alignment to the business objectives, what ends up happening is you begin to have science projects, what I call them. They're cool, they're neat, but they don't actually serve a huge value purpose. There may be some cost initiatives, but you might find that you're putting your resources, your energy, and your talent to solving a problem that the overall business is not necessarily strategically aligned. So making sure you have that strategic alignment to the objectives, I think, is paramount for you to have a successful AI implementation and strategy. After that, you start worrying about what are those use cases? What are those first iterations of the technology that you're going to go after? And then that really lines into what data, what information are you going to need? And is that uh, data ready for prime time, if you will, right? So does it have the
Mhm.
governance? Does it have the quality? Do you have lineage, cataloging, all the things that are necessary to get your data ready to actually implement those use cases? Now, the reality is, from a data management perspective, that can get very hairy, that can get very ugly very quickly, and that often takes multiple months, if not years, to actually
Mhm.
line up those things. But my experience has been you have to have some short-term wins. You have to demonstrate some value to the organization to continue making the investment so that they see the value long term. And so I always say prioritize your use cases, again, align to the business objective, but make them so that you can take advantage of the data that you have available today. And that's where I think generative AI becomes really exciting for a lot of people because it has a very low barrier of entry. People can start to tap into APIs and open AI. Um, so you start tapping into those APIs and start to leverage it. But as you know, there's a lot of challenges and risk with just leveraging the APIs when taking advantage of generative AI.
Yeah, I think we'll go in the second step of these challenges because just using an API and that's a public and everything they are storing and your organization data, how are you going to manage it? But maybe before that, one question. Maybe
Sure.
someone is an IT manager or an even CIO, and he got instruct just a CEO just spoke to him. The Chat GPT is in the hype and go do something on AI. Now he's back on his desk. So and then he need to delegate to someone else, and that's what I am observing it that okay, CIO is delegating to his team that, okay, what do you have in like an AI or a blockchain or any other emerging technology? But nowadays, as an I do to an AI, what would be your suggestion to that guy, one individual, that he just got an instruction, okay, go and hunt and do something on AI and come back to me, that we as an organization need to go for an AI? how he should be taking it up.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the reality is we're seeing that a lot, which is a me too
Yeah,
a mindset, right? Which
true.
is my competitors doing it. I see, I consider it management through a magazine, right?
Right.
So I've read it a bunch of magazines, so I want to go do what the magazines tell me I should go do. But I really challenge the leaders of the organization and this IT manager that you're speaking of to really question, is this the best use of my time, my resources, and my investment, my organization? Now, the answer might be yes. But again,
Mhm.
I would argue then demonstrate to me the key alignment to the strategy, right? Let me give you a prime example, right? If the answer is we want to leverage ChatGPT
Right.
and we're looking for use cases, if the objective of the organization is to create a better customer experience because they demonstrate that they will have a higher NPS score, for example, or a higher
True.
brand awareness as a result of improved customer experience, then I would say look for all opportunities for
Right.
you to leverage ChatGPT and other large language models to improve personalization, for example,
Mm.
in your advertisement, your marketing, so that could lead to a better, you know, customer satisfaction in the customer service departments. It could lead to better segmentation and targeting from a marketing perspective, and
Right.
then that would lead to a better customer experience. And so
Mhm.
that's a clear line of sight to saying I'm leveraging this technology, not just because my competitors are I'm being told to, but because I have clear alignment to our business objective of improving the customer experience. Does that help?
Yeah, and that helps. And I think another area is maybe we need to focus on. And AI is not all about only ChatGPT, right?
Absolutely not.
And organizations, and you must be working with a number of customers from so many, I mean, a couple of years back, or maybe more than that, that where there was a genuine use cases. They were in based in industry. I mean, starting from healthcare and manufacturing, or they were going ahead with those use cases. This just, I think, put the fuel at ChatGPT, but and then suddenly all AI become only ChatGPT. And I think that's where, and I like your idea that organization or whoever is going, he need to focus on that area rather than just keeping in mind that I need to utilize something on ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Don't you right?
correct. I think, to your point, there was a huge hype cycle prior to November of last year, right? Where
Right, right,
ChatGPT was released. There was still a huge hype cycle. I think the challenge, though, with that hype cycle was was there enough data for you to actually take advantage of machine learning, or were you going to spend a lot of time getting ready and getting your data ready to take advantage of those technologies? I think generative AI, whether that be, ChatGPT with text generation, whether that be Dolly or Midjourney with image generation, those things what have done is basically sped up the adoption of some of those
right.
technologies, right? And so I still would argue, though, that adoption will be short-lived and it will be novelty, unless, of course, it's tied to a business objective and you demonstrate value tied to those key pillars that the organization is moving.
All
That's
right.
when you start to see what I call the data flywheel, right? Which is now you're starting to generate more and more value to the organization, which means they want to make more investment, which means they want to try different use cases, which means they want to make better, value, which makes more investment, means more use cases, and it gets this flywheel going, right? And you're just doing a me too and trying it out where you're not necessarily aligned to the business objective, it'll demonstrate some short-term win, but it's not necessarily going to generate this flywheel effect, if you that's going to generate more use cases, more investment, and ultimately a more data-driven culture.
All right. I agree to you. So how now maybe how the catalytics started 7 years back, and how you from a business point of view you stand. I mean, is it growing how you
Yeah,
rate
I'm
yourself?
still, so like I said, had the opportunity working with some large clients. The reality is what we talked about, which is a lot of foundational work, right?
Mhm,
There's been a lot of, one of my previous clients, we're talking about data management. So we're talking about master data management and how
On the end,
we
right,
build tools and solutions to get that stuff ready to take advantage of these advanced analytics. In some cases, it's leveraging data visualization. So it's helping
right.
them really get new insights that they wouldn't otherwise have by having dashboards and visualizations that give them line of sight. So it really is the spectrum, if you will, right? Everything from establishing a foundation with the data to looking at visualizations, making new insights to predictive and algorithms that are going to give them line of, next best action that they could perform within it.
And it was based on services, right? Not rather not the product, but irrespective of product or
Correct, correct.
whoever.
Right now, I'm a services organization, right? So we focus on helping organizations, again, from a strategic perspective, aligning them to make sure that they are choosing the right use cases and prioritizing those use cases, and
Mhm,
eventually getting to the point where they can build a business case and
mhm.
ROI associated with leveraging these technologies.
All right. So maybe one more. What are some of the bad recommendations you hear, which are being proposed to the with respect to AI strategy or a data management strategy in organization, which you usually observed it with a lot of customers. Some areas are not good, or maybe those are not aligned.
Yeah, I think people have a people don't want to hear they're not ready, right? Is
Ah,
typically what tends to happen, right?
right.
Everybody, wants to be ready. And what I
Yeah.
found, Kashif, is think of it like it's January 1st, you've made a New Year's resolution to lose
Right.
weight. And so the first thing you want to do is go buy a treadmill,
True.
right? And you're like, because that shows me we've done something and I'm moving towards my goal, right? In
Hmm.
the AI world, what I'm experiencing or what I've seen is um, they have created a plan. They call it, a strategy, but really it is focused on infrastructure and saying, well, we just, signed a deal with Snowflake, in
Yeah.
instance, right? Or we just, hired 10 data scientists, right?
Hmm.
And therefore we are marching towards our goal. And the reality is it's not comprehensive. That's not a
Hmm.
strategy, right? That is a plan and it's a roadmap. But a strategy, I would argue, needs to be aligned to develop a competitive advantage for your organization. So, how is a Snowflake or 10 data scientists aligned to ensuring that you're creating a competitive advantage for your organization? Again, is that better customer experience? Is that better operational efficiency? Is that improved supply chain management? Is that whatever that may be? How are the tools that you're putting in place, the resources you're putting in place, the capability that you're putting in place allow you to get to that strategic competitive advantage? And
Hmm.
so, with that in mind, I think that's some of the challenge that we're experiencing right now in today's environment, which is
Hmm.
people want to demonstrate that they're doing something. They're
Hmm.
buying that treadmill to show that they're moving, but yet they may be creating more challenge and the investment may not be in the right place.
Hmm. All right. And maybe one more question on the that will give some insight to the who's progressing a career in AI, or maybe he wanted to learn on it, learn for that. So if you need to hire you in your organization some teammates, resources, and your focus is on maybe data analytics or an AI or machine learning, so what are the characteristics or traits you want to have in that person, or you know so maybe some insights or guidelines so that whoever is hearing about it, that he can, and he's pursuing it, that I want to be going for that career journey. So what should be the ideal candidate?
That's a great question. I think that person needs to be looking at the entire business, right? So
Mm,
not just from an analytics perspective, but really what is the business challenges that are currently being uh, present within
mhm.
the organization. So really needs someone who understands the business objective, and at the end of the day, to be real honest, Kashif, can tell a story, can really
Mm,
demonstrate that they understand what's the objective that the business is targeting, and then understand how data and analytics can play a role. Again, AI, data, analytics is just a tool. It's a tool
right.
to allow you to make better decisions, in my opinion. Right? But without those tools, I think it becomes very challenging for organizations to make sure that they're choosing the right tool. Because right now, data is overwhelming. There's so
Mm,
much of it that's coming at you so fast. And the reality is, it's more than humans can comprehend or able to take advantage of. And so, really needs someone who can recognize the value that AI brings, understand the technology to some extent, and then
right.
really understand the business objective and tell a story. Because at the end of the day, you need to gain investment and you need to get buy-in from different stakeholders for really this AI adoption to really take. So those are the skills I think you would need: a storyteller, someone that understands business objectives, not just the technology or the AI, and really can tie all those things together to build a strong business case and a strong ROI to drive AI adoption throughout the organization.
Right. So maybe before closing to the call, if a fresh college graduate and he want to pursue a career in this field, what he should be doing it? Any hints, tips for him?
Yeah, I always tell people who I'm mentoring to start with a hypothesis, start with a problem you're trying
Mm,
to solve. Don't start with the data, because the data, a lot of people, and I use EDA with exploratory data analysis to look for things, right? But too often in organizations, people are saying, here's the data, tell me what we should go do. And actually, I look at that as the wrong approach. I say start with a hypothesis. For example, we have too many people that are churning. We have a customer retention challenge. Now, help me understand what data we have available. How do we analyze that data? What tools could we use to help us challenge and really address that? So if I was coming out of college, what I suggest to mentors or mentees is really start with a hypothesis and really go after that hypothesis. Understand what data sources are available, how to analyze that, really question, and learn to ask great questions of people and stakeholders, right? Ask questions that to you may, be really unknown, but to them it's just second nature. But without asking it, you don't know how that's going to affect your analysis. That's not going to how it's going to affect your features and your attributes. All those things play very key into making sure you choose the right technology and solution that's going to address their challenge.
And I agree to that. And as you just reminded me, I just finished my submitted my dissertation, and I took the wrong approach, which you just highlighted. So I took the public data set of health, the USA birth data set, and I thought this birth data set will give me the questions and answers. And I spent 2 months working on that data set, trying to
Yeah.
find it, and I didn't get anything. And then I realized that maybe I need to go back and I need to find out, okay, in the women's health, what I want to identify. Is it like pregnancy issues or a low birth or maybe early, birth? And the moment I realized that one, then I reworked my,
Yes.
entire dissertation. So out of 6 months, I spent 2 months on this data set. And I like your answer. This is what I
No,
did
I,
it.
I think I think that's the reality is you have to start off with a problem, right? And a hypothesis. I think X, Y, and Z. Now let me go see if the data aligns to that, right? And you have to be careful, right? Of bias, because you don't want to look for data that confirms that bias, right?
Right.
That's confirmation bias. And so in that regard, you have to really be comprehensive. In too many organizations, people are, I'm going to hire all these data scientists, give them all this data, and say, now tell me what problems it can solve, as opposed to the other way, which is go to the sales leadership and say, what challenges are you having? Are you not having great close rates? Are your lead generations bad? Their quality issue from a lead perspective. Are the products not there? Are you having customer success issues with the product? Those kind of questions then start to say, okay, I have a hypothesis. Now,
Mhm.
what data can help me infer if there's levers that we can pull to improve that challenge?
Really appreciate. Thank you so much, Frank. And I think I love the discussion, and we got some number of good areas for anyone who's listening to us today. That if he's either going for a strategy or maybe he's pursuing a new career journey, he can learn and can visit. So before concluding our calls, maybe you want to leave some concluding remarks to the listener.
Again, Kashif, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. I've enjoyed this conversation. And if anyone's interested in continuing the conversation, all I ask is you reach out to me on LinkedIn, Frank Mendoza. I think my tag is FX Mendoza on LinkedIn. I would love to continue the conversation with anyone that's interested.
Thank you so much, Frank. Really appreciate.